welcome back in. We have a lot to discuss today. I just wanted to go over some stuff about Celsius stock and then talk about the semi stocks, what's going on with them, specifically AMD because I own the name, but I'll also talk about SanDisk and the whole semi space in general. I'd like to break down what I think is happening with NBIS as well, going into earnings, then talk about where the market is headed, and then my top three stocks I'm looking to buy right now. Um, Top three stocks I'm going to give at the end are companies that I think are going to do tremendously in the short term as well as long term. So I think it's amazing buys for those. And if you guys enjoy my videos, leave a like, subscribe, and without further ado, let's get into it. So what's happening with Celsius? So before we get in, just listen. Use this opportunity to buy as much of the stock as possible. Because listen, a lot of people care about what happens in the short term for stocks. What happens in the next month, what happens in the next year, what happens in the next blah blah blah. It doesn't matter, okay? Um, there's some negative stuff surrounding the stock. There's their earnings they just reported. They had revenue being not accelerating as much as they would hope for such a company. You had like revenue on their main drink being down, all of this negativity. There's restructuring costs. There's costs to get out of supplier contracts, distributor contracts. They acquired some brands. They're still working on building that stuff out. They're not expanded internationally yet. There's this, there's that. There's talk about, oh, are they going to change CEOs? Which I definitely don't like, but all the short term stuff. But let me tell you what, if the stock goes down 20% or up 20%, you shouldn't care. If the stock goes down 40% or up 40%, you shouldn't care. You know why? Because you should be looking at the stock from a long term perspective. That's what you should do for pretty much every stock you own. You want to see where the company is 5, 10, 15 years down the line. You shouldn't care where the stock goes within the next 1, 2 years. So I think Celsius is probably bottoming. Obviously, you can't tell exactly when something bottoms. If you could, you'd be rich, but I think it's probably going to be bottoming. There's a lot of negative sentiment, but let me debunk some of this stuff I just said. Their growth was down. Okay, they had to pay some restructuring costs. They're having to do some stuff. It's probably going to be the hardest time for the company right now. There are tariffs, there's all this, but it's not looking too bad. The numbers obviously aren't that good, but they're not bad either. They're just okay. And if this is going to be the worst time for the company and they can put up okay numbers, then I'd love to be in the company where they're going to be in good times and putting up really good numbers. Some of the fees they didn't even have to pay. Pepsi paid it for them. They just had to mark it down on the earnings sheet. But I stand on this every single time I talk about the company. I really think international is going to be a huge part of the business. They're taking market share in the US. I think they're going to be the biggest energy drink brand in the US 5, 10 years down the line. And I think they have potential to do that across the world as well. They have Alani, they have Celsius brand. Both are extremely popular. They're both growing very nicely. They are both kind of the top of their niches in the market. They also have Rockstar, which they acquired, which is something they could build into a bigger part of the business. But they have lots of growth opportunity. And if you look at the energy drink space, if you want to be invested in it, there's only one company with high growth, high potential, high excitement behind it, and that's Celsius. So if you want to invest in this whole drink space really at all, you have to buy Celsius. And listen, just remember you got to invest about the long term. Ignore short term drama, ignore any stuff that's happening in the market now because you have to have a long term horizon, okay? So, tariffs, this and that, it all pass. Just buy good stocks. Celsius is an amazing stock to buy. I've bought a bit more recently. I do obviously have it as my second biggest position. I would buy more, and I probably will, but it is getting to be quite a big position, so I'm trying to not buy too much, but hey, if it still stays around these prices or goes lower, I will continue to add. Next up, I wanted to talk about semiconductor stocks. If you look at AMD past month, down 15%. SanDisk past month, down 30%. These stocks are making lower lows basically. They're on a kind of a steady downtrend, slightly down basically, and if you look recently, they've kind of flattened out a little bit, but still, it's not where you want to see the stocks. I was advocating a lot for AMD stock to really pump after earnings. Obviously, this didn't happen, but I think that in the market, if you look historically, most um, chip memory, semi stocks are going to do the best during fall and they're going to do the worst in summer right before that fall. And if you look at the timeline, it lines up pretty well. So that would say that if you look at historically what happens, that AMD, these memories, these all these other stocks will basically start running in the fall. And I think it's very plausible that happens. I thought it could run a bit sooner with AMD earnings, but they didn't post super exciting earnings. They were obviously very good, but it wasn't what I was expecting. So I think that AMD, SanDisk, Micron, Nvidia, all of these stocks are really going to start pumping going into fall time, so around October through January, basically. Obviously, I could be wrong. They could just stay flat for a year, but I think long term, AMD specifically, because that's the stock I own, I think it's an $1,000 to $1,500 company. And I think that we could very well front run a lot of this stuff within the next 1 to 2 years. Am I going to bet money on it? No, that's my own educated guess on what's happening with the company. So, I also wanted to bring something else to mind that the the way that I could see the semi stocks pumping as well is that a lot of money is currently rotated out of them into software stocks. And if you look at what happened before, a lot of money was coming out of software and going into semis. So I could very well see a case where it flips and a lot of this money from SaaS goes back into semis. And I could also see a case where a lot of money from the uh, big tech names, so like the Meta, the Amazon, the Google, all of those names, would go out of there and go into semis, and I could also see a case where both things happened at once. And I think any way you put it, semis are going to run basically year-endish into January or fall into January, wherever you want to put it. I think they're going to run. So I think you really have to have some exposure to those names, and my favorite name to get that exposure would be AMD. Now let's talk a little bit about NBIS. They had earnings coming up soon. They have Michael Burry shorting the stock. They have this, they have that. It looks kind of bad, honestly, for the company. Not on a technical standpoint, but the sentiment standpoint. So you know what I think? I think it's a good time to buy the stock. I obviously have a position. Buying before earnings is a bit of a risk, but listen, if everything looks negative, it's probably going to end up positive. A lot of the stock market is kind of backwards from what you would think is going to happen because the market seems like, oh, sentiment goes one way, everything's bad, and that's when something usually bottoms. And if you look at the stock, we're down below $200 and highs are just under 300. I think we could go back up to 300 pretty soon, especially with earnings, especially if they post some good earnings, launch another partnership with someone. I think that market could be wrong about Nebius as well. As for where the market is headed, I think that we're nowhere near a drawback or recession or any of this stuff. Something that I thought was interesting was Berkshire Hathaway has begun to deploy some of their cash pile, and this cash pile they've been adding to for the past 14 quarters, so that's a very bullish thing for the market. Such a company adding, I think they added some Google, maybe some of their own stock. I forget exactly what, but it's a pretty bullish thing for the market because they are quite conservative. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is treasury yields are currently not the lowest, so if they do decide to drop, money is going to come into the market, and I think that this is probably a likely thing to happen over the next 1 to 2 years. And you also have to keep in mind a lot of different sectors in the market has been kind of chilled out there. Consumers not been doing the best. Obviously, housing has been doing terrible, and anything related to that has been doing really bad. So really, the market has been carried a lot by tech, and I think there is going to be one last tech run. I think that this run that we're going to have, which in my mind happens fall into end of year, maybe a bit into next year, it's going to be the last big run for tech. Um, and I think we're going to have a big rotation out of tech into other markets that have been pretty dead for the past 4, 5, 6 years. So that's my personal opinion on that. And then finally, my top three stocks to buy right now. We have AMD, Celsius, and SoFi. So let me break it down real quickly for you. AMD I already talked about, same with SoFi, Celsius, but I'll give you a little breakdown. AMD, you need to have exposure to chip stocks. AMD is the most exciting. They're going to grow a whole lot. Their growth rates are only going to accelerate. They're basically like NVIDIA 4 or 5 years ago when they're accelerating their growth. And it's just really something you want to take part in. Um, I think that I true-heartedly believe that it's going to 1,000, 1,500. I've made videos in the past discussing fundamentals and technical analysis on the stock. I don't want to get too far into it, but personally, I believe 1,000 to 1,500 is very likely. That's why around 40% of my portfolio is in AMD. I've been invested since $96 and I'm up over 400%. Second, Celsius. I discussed it a lot in this video. Everything stands. Amazing company. It's getting hated on right now because it's cheap. Oh, the stock's going down. I bet you if it was up, people would be loving the stock. But listen, if you believe in management, you believe in the company, you believe in what they're doing, you shouldn't care about sentiment because you should be looking at it from a long-term perspective. And lastly, SoFi. It has run up a little bit. If you look at where the stock closed today, it closed at just under $18, and it's up obviously from, I think it hit 14 or $15 from the lows a few weeks ago. But listen, SoFi is such an amazing buy for 10, 15, 20 years out. And I think it's also a good buy for the next 1 to 2 years out. Stock is pretty undervalued. I think it should be worth $25 to $30 right now. And the whole environment, macro environment for SoFi is quite bad right now. They weren't able to capitalize on the IPO uh, whole craze that went on over the past few months, like the big banks have, because they don't have really a set thing for IPOs. They obviously have something, but it's not as big as the bigger banks, so they haven't been able to capitalize on that. Rates have been questionable. The Fed is thinking about raising it. You have the war, you have everything going on. You have Trump tweeting stuff. All of this stuff is quite bad for SoFi. Um, but stock is really punishing the company when if you look at the actual fundamentals itself, it's the best it's ever been. So it just seems like a amazing buying opportunity. And I just want to say, hats off to Anthony Noto. I love him as a CEO. I love the management team and what they're doing with the company. And they're genuinely positioning the stock or the company to be a huge financial giant in the next 15, 10, 20 years. So they're really stealing a lot of the younger generation. You're thinking, oh, it doesn't matter. Baby boomers have the money. Why do we care about 20, 25-year-olds who have no money? Well, listen, you're going to care a lot in 10 years, 10, 15 years when they do have a lot of money and they're going to be making with SoFi. And you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'll just wait to buy the stock. Oh, I'll wait. The stock isn't going to wait for you. It's going to run up. I think it's undervalued now. A 100% move could be coming within the next 1 to 2 years. Then over the next 10, 15 years, I genuinely think this could be a life-changing stock over the long term. 10x plus your money, I think. So that's my thoughts on the market and stuff in general. If you guys want to see more of my videos, check out my channel. I also post shorts, try and post 3 a day. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.